Right, so you know Natalie Portman?
The
I'm
actress.
aware.
The actress, very beautiful and such a talent. I was thinking about her the other week, right?
Yeah.
And I thought to myself, genuinely, Natalie, and I thought it today as well, Natalie Portman might have sex tonight, and good for her.
I mean, there's a lot of people you could.
No, only Natalie Portman.
Only Natalie Portman
Only
might have
Natalie
sex
Portman.
tonight. No one else might have sex tonight.
Well, she's the only one that deserves to, let's be honest. She's the people's princess, right? Queen of Hearts. No, I don't know what it is about her specifically. And by the way, I have a moral question/dilemma attached to this as well. But I don't know what it is, but I just every now and then just think Natalie Portman may elect to have sex tonight, and she'll probably enjoy it if it was her idea. So, you know, she does deserve it. Is that sexualizing her? Because I'm not getting off on it. Not that she isn't very beautiful and such a talent, but I'm not, like, sitting there going, oh, yeah, like smoking a cigar, just, oh, she might get fucked tonight. Oh, I wonder if it'll be up the arse. I'm not thinking that, because she's not Jonathan Holmes.
Look, I'd have said not sexual until you shut down the idea that anyone else on the planet might have sex tonight. Because you've now really narrowed it into Natalie Portman's the only one who might have sex. And that does feel a little targeted.
It does feel a bit, doesn't it? Although I don't think it's about the likelihood of sex as it is the merit. Being deserving. Because, you know, look, I have sex on the reg. Don't necessarily feel I've earned it.
As about this for a follow-up question. Why do you think she deserves it? Because if the reason isn't to do with sex, if there's an external non-sex reason you think that she deserves to have sex, then it's maybe not sexualized? Is it like, oh, I heard in an interview she's done her taxes, she deserves to have some sex? Is it an unsexy reason that you think she deserves some sex?
I love that. Taxes, the liver and onions. And sex is the Viennetta afterwards. Just a nice little treat. That's the thing. Like, you've really gotten deep. You've gotten deep into the weeds on this one. You've gotten at the real sort of crux of the philosophical argument. This is the kind of thing Kant would talk about. I don't know if he would. I'm not familiar with the works of Kant. I just think saying his name makes me sound intellectual. But I can't think of a reason why I am so... Hey, that's all right, isn't it? Why I am so invested on an emotional, not a physical level, in the idea of Natalie Portman deserving her great sex.
Because the more I think about this, the more I'm like, if you think it's only her that deserves it, she's got to have done something that only she's done. What has only she been up to?
Yeah.
That's made you go, yeah, she could probably have some sex that wasn't bad, and that would be okay.
And I'd be made up for her. I'd be that's the other part of it as well, is my emotional investment in her having great sex. Because I'd be so happy for her. And that would lift me up. Not in that way. It would just make me have a positive, and it helps me already have a positive outlook, just imagining Natalie Portman enjoying her sex. Which I'm not imagining. I'm not imagining the sex itself. I'm imagining Natalie Portman thinking, this is great sex. And to be honest, I've earned this. You know, and I'm not one to judge. This is not judgy either. Like, I'm not saying, oh, you know, I bet she has a lot of sex. Certainly not one to judge there. As far as I'm concerned, any port in a man. But
okay, I'm going to try and get to the root of this. I have a theory, and you're going to have to give me a second to run down a very specific list.
Right.
If you found out today that I had been nominated for Best Supporting Actress, won Best Actress in Black Swan, but only been nominated in Jackie, and these are all at the Academy Awards. Then you found out I'd been nominated at the BAFTAs for Best Actress in a Supporting Role. I'd won Best Actress in Black Swan, but again, only been nominated in Jackie. Golden Globes, a mix of 3 nominations, 2 wins, Screen Actors Guild Awards, 1 win, 2 nominations, over the course of 2004 to 2017. If I had that mix of awards, would you think I deserved sex tonight?
I'd want to bang you. Oh, wait. That's different. Oh, it's the Noms. The awards make me want to bang someone. The Noms make me want to think about them enjoying being banged. It's the Noms.
Okay, it's the nominations. It's
all
the,
about
you
the
almost
Noms.
got a win, but you didn't. You got a little let down, but like you were still told you did very well. But like, you deserve a little treat. For the award you didn't get. That's a good non-sexual reason to hope that she has some good sex.
Yeah, that's got to be it, because when I'm masturbating to Black Swan, I'm thinking about the Golden Globes. I'm thinking about those awards. That's it. What's the opposite of Schadenfreude?
I wanted to say Freudenschau.
That's it. It's awards for gratification and noms for Freudenschau. It's all about the noms.
Well, welcome to Podquisition.
Welcome to Podquisition. This is some of the most egregious bollocks I've ever spouted on this show. But hey, it's episode 501. It's the 501st episode special. So I thought I'd kick us off how I mean to go on, which is terribly.
We started our second season, as it were, with episode 251, a lot of political talk. Season 3, as it were, this is the foot we mean to lead with.
It's pure nonsense.
We can do political talk as well. I worked on Date Everything. I know a lot about fucking a couch.
Who's played video games this week?
We've all played. We've had some crossover.
Mm-hmm.
We have had some crossover. Which bit of crossover do we start with?
I want to hear about the funny game.
I want to talk about the funny game.
In the same way that Natalie Portman deserves sex, I believe Thank Goodness You're Here deserves the first spotlight, because it's amazing.
It's a good fucking video game, that.
It's
a good fucking video game if you are from specific parts of the UK and not a very baffled Californian who doesn't understand what the fuck is happening.
Yeah, if they know now about lingo, which, if Fee hears me saying that in the other room, they're going to go fucking spare. It's very Northern England specific in terms of not just where it's set, but a lot of the parodies and piss takes in it. And as someone who lives in Yorkshire, and has lived in Yorkshire for the past few years, and grew up with an evil stepdad who was from Yorkshire, it's all true. Everything costs 10 bob. Kids fish in rubbish-filled rivers, although that's also true of the south. Sheffield is to be looked down upon. Big pies and butter.
Big Baz's buttery nubs.
Big Baz's buttery nubs is, a well-known chain store here, along with Price Shaggers.
Look, you can barely go into a Meg's on the high street and not hear an old woman say she'd rather shit bed than eat a vegan sausage roll.
Exactly. Plus there's graffiti on the wall that says all coppers are bellends, which is just a wonderfully English take on it.
I appreciate the amount of anti-Thatcher graffiti going on in this game. The references to Milk Snatcher going on.
Yeah. That's always one of my favourite criticisms of Margaret Thatcher. My brother never let go of the milk. Milk Snatcher this.
Thatcher, Milk Snatcher. Yeah.
My brother exclusively calls Margaret Thatcher the milk thief. So I'm always delighted when I see the Milk Snatcher thing.
Yeah.
So this is an adventure game with some puzzle platforming elements, but it's all just an excuse.
It's kind of a very light point and click adventure almost, but that's just a veneer for you to cycle through a very silly town.
Yeah, I think if I were to contrive a genre for it, I'd just call it a stupidity simulator, and I'd mean it as a compliment.
It's a point and bum slap.
It is. One of my favourite bits, because, again, it's so dumb, and that's what's so good about the game. My favourite bit is the man running the burger van.
I knew it was going to be this closed for Slappy Bum
Smacky
time.
Bum. He turns around, you slap him, he shuts the shutter, and it says, closed due to Smacky Bum Bum, and I laugh every time. Every time.
My favourite thing about that is stopping to think about the world-building logic. Because that's already painted on the outside of his van,
It is.
like when you arrive. So it's not because of you that he shuts the shutters and it says closed for Smacky Bum Bum.
I still love it.
Not only does it suggest closed for Smacky Bum Bum is like a frequent occurrence, it suggests that like that's visible anytime he closes the shop, even when he closes it for the night. He's not ever closing the shop because he wants to. It's only ever closed because of Smacky Bum Bum.
I mean, that is a wonderful example of just how gloriously ridiculous the whole world is. I also love the fishmonger who also sells cigarettes, and so you slap the fish that he's got on display to knock cigarettes from outside of them into their mouths.
The one who sings songs that imply he was a fish in a past life and has only recently become a man.
The kid that wants his, is it a cup of tea or breakfast? One of the things, but he can't go get milk from the local cow because I'm too milk shy.
For anyone, like, coming into this game, it's like 2.5 hours long, and, like, the premise is the least of a justification that could exist. You work for a company that sells something. You're never told what your company sells, but Barnsworth needs what you're selling, so you go to speak to the mayor to sell him, but the mayor's busy, so now you're in town dealing with Barnsworth.
Yeah, people are thrilled to see you, and they all say, thank goodness you're here. Because they need help, and their needs are ridiculous.
But they're ridiculous needs that are stated as if they're the most normal thing in the world someone could need help with. Its humour is this really good mix of very dryly stated absurdity alongside a real love for repeating the same joke over and over, but just building up how long they make you wait for the punchline you know is coming. It is a real good emphasis on, like, we will set up a punchline and not pay it off for like an hour and a half and have some unrelated character bring it back and have it pay off. It loves a bit of absurdist humour, it loves a bit of a very dry pun delivery.
There's some real surreal moments as well, like dreamlike sequences, that some of them get a bit, like, dark in subject matter, but it's not one of these games that, like, goes to, like, horror levels. It's just every now and then you're just like, oh, that's a disturbing line. And then it's right back to the nonsense, and it still always keeps this bright, ridiculous tone.
It does a really good job, in my opinion, of pacing, which is a hard thing to do in interactive media. I think a couple of the ways it does that is by playing with when you have control over things and when you don't. And to give a couple of, like, really light examples, there is a very early sequence where you are cutting some grass, and there are two flowers telling each other they love each other, and you are directly responsible for very slowly, over time, mowing the grass closer and closer and closer, and you have to right and left with the analog stick to mow and mow and mow, and you are responsible for the thing you know there's no other option to.
Yeah, the way this ends is obvious.
Except it's not quite what you expect, but some of it is what you expect.
Yeah, because it's got that, and this can be a kind of British thing as well. I would be surprised if this game was not influenced by a lot of 90s British comedy, because The Fast Show was one of the biggest hits of the 90s, and that was so catchphrase based, and it was one of those things where you always knew what was coming, but seeing it still made you laugh.
Yeah, there's that one gentleman in this who, you know, whatever he says, you know, he's about to compare it to things his wife could learn.
My wife could learn a thing or two.
Yeah, you know exactly what the punchline's going to be, but you have to hit him again to hear it, and you have to be responsible for him saying it again.
But what's so great about, and you alluded to it with the flower cutting moment, is first you get that laugh of, I know this is going to end the way it ends. It ends, and you laugh, and then the joke continues in an unexpected, brilliant way.
There's just a little bit more jokes than you thought you signed up for, and that combo of relief from the anticipated joke plus a little extra joke is a really nice combo.
Yeah.
But you compare that with, like, there are other examples of very similar, you know the punchline is coming, when's it going to come, that deliberately deny you that control. There's a running joke about a chimney that deliberately doesn't give you control of when its payoff comes. And I think mixing you are complicit in this versus you don't get to control when we pay this off, that I think keeps the humour of this playing very well.
Yeah. It's a game, and there are games that don't understand. Most games don't understand this. Not just the importance of storytelling, but especially comedy. You know, the number one rule of comedy is timing. One of the oldest sort of common truths, I guess, about how comedy works is it is nailing the time for a joke. And this game understands that, which is why it lets you have control over things where a long time the payoff will be worth it. But like with the chimney gag, they know what's going to be the funniest moment.
Sometimes they know, we can't trust you with the timing on this one. We've got to make sure you don't fuck this one up.
Yeah.
And they don't do it that often, but...
Yeah, because that joke wouldn't be funny if you could make it happen any time. Because you know exactly when the punchline comes, it's when you decide you're ready for it. And certain jokes, especially in this game, need you to not be ready for it. Because there's so much in this game that I wasn't ready for.
Yeah. But I want to say, like, I know it's really easy to talk about this game in terms of the humour, but I do want to talk about some other aspects of it that I think are pretty good and worth talking about. There is some genuinely very sweet moments in this, and there are some plot lines that when they eventually do pay off, do so in a way that is, like, really sweet and has a genuine respect for culture and community that I don't think the humour sort of prepared me for. There's a whole plot line with a man with his veg shop that, like, I was not ready for how sweet and genuine that was going to eventually play out. I like a lot of the stuff structurally it does with how progression is done, because unlike something like a point-and-click adventure game where you might have to backtrack and wander around unsure about where to go to, progress with what's going on, generally speaking, you keep being prevented from backtracking, and the area you're going through is essentially a loop. And the area you're looking for will always be either where you currently are, or continue around the loop until you find something new. It really keeps the pace moving in a way that makes it pretty unlikely that you will spend too long unsure where to be. And I think, again, that helps with... The game is so much about timing in its humour that getting stuck and unsure where to go to continue a plot thread would risk hampering that pacing.
Oh, yeah.
And I think they do a really good job of structuring it in a way where even if you're not going to go directly to the thing you were looking for, you're going to stumble upon something new that keeps that pace moving.
Yeah, absolutely. Whenever you're in one of the areas, just slapping about, even if you're not sure where to go, you'll find it. Yeah. My only criticism of the way it's structured is when you've gone down like things like a drain pipe. The first time it's quite funny, and there's often little variance at all when you're going through the traversal sections again. And that's the only time where I'm like, this is where it's slowed a bit, but it's barely noticeable because you're pretty soon then dropped into new stuff.
I think that some of them justify their existence, like the ones where a full-length game gag is being executed through the movements. Like, I wouldn't suggest removing the bit of pipe that you move under that woman with the Diana plate.
Oh, absolutely.
Exactly. Or, down the bottom of the well with the little worm that tells you worm facts. But that's not every transition, and some of the transitions, I will agree, are a bit more one-note than others.
Yeah, and it is only a very minor criticism. The only other one, which is more just me being greedy, I think, is you can slap so much in the environment that I wish there was more incidental payoff. Like, at the beginning, when you slap 3 bin bags quickly enough, like, rats will pop out and sing. There isn't a lot of that for the rest of it. Most NPCs, when you slap them, they'll just go, oof. And a lot of the items you can hit will just get some, minor superficial damage. I'd love more of that, but it's not as if the game isn't doing enough.
No, and I appreciate that the oof responses make it very clear this person has nothing more for you at this time. You can move on and not waste your time.
Oh, yeah, as a cap on what's being said, absolutely.
But I get you, yeah. But yes, I find this game charming as all hell.
It's amazing. It's so good.
There are going to be some people who are going to pick it up and are going to go, I don't understand what is happening, and that is fine, it's not for you, but it's beautiful.
Yeah, like even the main menu.
Oh, yes.
Like the main menu selections, Guon and Sithé and stuff, and Faf.
Even before that, it's do you want the dialogue and the subtitles to be written in Northern English dialect? Is asked from Tarn. And it's either, you answer affirmatively, or there is an option that's like, I don't understand, what is it you're asking me?
Yeah. And even
for whether this option's just not for you.
Even as someone who has lived in the North for a while, I hadn't heard Tarn before. I figured out it was, I looked at it and said, it's more than likely this is town. But I did double check with Faye.
My understanding is it is specifically Barnsley. Like, it's Barnsley town specifically.
That'll be why I hadn't heard it.
Yeah, it is a very specifically localized thing, that one. But
I live basically next door to Barnsley.
It's basically like, are you scared off by seeing these words, or are you like, nah, I can muddle through this, this'll be fine. Yeah, it's a charming little game, that.
It's just utterly delightful. I laughed a lot throughout.
Agreed, yeah.
The scene with the milk, the cutscene where there's a lot of milk, that's all I'll say. The kid on the wall, the joy on his face, the way he just turns a little bit to look at the policeman and then turns back without changing his expression. That had me in fucking stitches.
I played a thing this week that Conrad has also been playing that I want to chuck in here quickly. So, last couple of weeks you've been talking about that Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Splintered Fate, the co-op Hades-like.
Right.
And I picked that up this week.
And how are you finding it?
It sure is knockoff Hades.
Yep.
But I'm pretty digging it.
Yeah.
A couple of things I want to say about it that I don't think you mentioned when talking about it previously that I want to add. If you pick this game up explicitly to play it in co-op, which is what I did, I spent most of my Sunday afternoon playing it with Jane, the start of the narrative just doesn't exist if you just jump into co-op straight away when you boot up the game.
Yes. Yeah, there's a tutorial. Yeah.
Yeah, the tutorial / beginning of the plot only exists if you boot up single player. And I think the game could do a better job of going, hey, boot up single player and at least play through this before co-ops, so that co-op isn't starting referencing a bunch of events you didn't see. But I think my big takeaway about this is, sure, this is Hades, and it's Hades that is not nearly as polished. It is Hades that's rough around the edges. It is Hades without nearly as much of the audio-visual polish, the narrative polish, the sense of loving care having gone into it. It feels a little like a cheap mimicry of what worked well in Hades. Some examples of this that kind of stood out. You could play Hades for like 70, 80 hours, the first one, and still be getting original new dialogue when you get to bosses. Here, within like 6 hours, you're like, oh, I've already seen the first boss give exactly the same dialogue 5 times in a row. There's a lot less of that excess of ludicrous amounts of material being put in there to prevent you seeing repetition. I would argue that like there's a lot less clarity around making the equivalent of boons you pick up feel immediately clear what they're going to do and feel as visually impactful when being used. But at the end of the day, that's a trade-off I'm really willing to make to play this in co-op, because it plays really nicely in co-op.
It does, yeah.
Yeah. I think they do a pretty good job with zooming out the camera as you move apart from each other in local co-op, even if occasionally if you move too far apart, player 2 will just get left by the camera, and that can be a bit stressful, and I kind of wish there was a visual tell to go, you are at the limit, don't move further apart, or player 2's going to get left off screen.
Yep.
But by comparison, I do like that when you buy permanent upgrades, like more revives through runs, your other player gets them too. I appreciate that if one of you runs out of revives mid-run, but the other person can clear the current room, you'll pop back up with half health. So as long as one of you survives the room, the other one gets revived and can keep going. I think that once you start getting into the meat of its boon system, there are a lot of interesting choices that I like. I think that having not choose which door to go through for a guaranteed reward, but instead, no matter what room you do, here are 3 or 4 choices between have a new ability, upgrade an existing one, have some permanent resources, etc., does help set that stuff aside. I like the idea of trinkets giving you boosted odds for that random chance of, oh, I picked a water boon and it went, have another water boon, why the fuck not? Have a second one right now for free. That's a thing that I do like and that does give this a bit of its own identity. I like how clear the visual iconography is for where enemy attacks are going to hit and whether you're in the danger zone or not. I think that's very well laid out. It might just be knockoff Hades, but I'm very much enjoying having knockoff Hades to play with decent co-op. I'm pretty glad I bought it.
Yeah, that's kind of where I landed on it too, and I'm still playing it here and there. Linda and I will often do a run in the evenings, and have been enjoying that. And meanwhile, I make most of my progress individually. One weird thing that's happened to us, a lot with the co-op is she just seems to get 2 extra revives that I don't get.
Oh, not what I was going to say. When playing in 2-player, Jane as player 2 gets 95% of the double chooser boons.
Interesting.
Yeah, like almost exclusively she gets offered them. And as player 1, I basically never fucking see them.
I get a little more even dispersal of that when I'm playing. But another thing that I've noticed that happens with the co-op that's kind of interesting is that only one version of each tool can exist.
Oh.
Yeah, so I've had circumstances where I have been playing, and Linda likes to play Michelangelo, and I'll be playing as Raphael, and she'll get offered the Turtle Line tool, which is Raphael's default, and she'll take it because it's great, and I don't blame her, but then I wind up with her taunt instead. And get stuck with it for some reason. So that's something to look out for. I have been really going hard with the ninja powers. One of the interesting things about the way this is structured as opposed to Hades is that almost half of the turtle power types can apply effects to your attack or your special, but they don't occupy the slot that your attack or special, they're just they're passive additional bonuses as opposed to being a focus version of some ability.
Yeah, so your basic attack could be doing water damage and also ooze damage, and picking ooze damage on your regular attack doesn't stop your regular attack doing water damage.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think that that's kind of interesting, and that lends itself to some interesting combinations because, especially with the ninja, you can build an entire, very successful build around just dashing.
Yeah.
With a good combination focused around ninja, especially if you're Leonardo, because he gets a mastery option for ninja abilities, giving a 5% damage bonus to the shurikens that you can throw for every ability that you've got. And so you can get shurikens on the dash and then get either a goo ability or an Utrom ability on your dash that's very effective. And then there is a themed tool of shurikens that you can pick up also that are either goo or Utrom. And when you get that, it affects every shuriken you throw.
Yeah.
And so you can just start to stack. It eventually can get up to launching about, I think, 6 shuriken per dash. And if you have 4 dashes, and you get them ricocheting off of enemies, and you're getting a plus 120% damage bonus just on the shurikens before you factor in bonuses from things like ooze or Utrom, you are just wrecking shit. The Bebop Rocksteady fight can become a joke as you just dash between the two of them, and the 24 shurikens that you're releasing bounce back and forth between them, sometimes putting on guard break. It's just it does also have those opportunities for just outrageously crazy builds.
Yeah.
It's just, 80% of the time.
Yeah. I want to put more time into it, and I'm looking forward to playing some of it in single player when I've got travel coming up this next couple of weeks. But yeah, it is. It is 70-80% of the way to being a Hades, but 70 or 80% of a Hades is still a pretty damn good time.
Yep.
And I'm glad I picked it up. So yeah, what about you, Conrad? You been playing anything this week?
I have. I hopped onto Game Pass to check out what was recently added there, and there's a game published by Capcom called Kunitsu-Gami, Path of the Goddess. Steph, I think you played this too.
I have. I stopped after I streamed it because I played for a while thinking, I've got a handle on this. This is, and so far it's not been easy, but it's been very manageable. And as soon as I started the stream, I hit my first difficulty spike, and I've not played it since my second difficulty spike. So you've probably played it a bit more than I have.
I doubt it then, because I haven't really experienced what I would consider a difficulty spike yet. And
okay.
I am, I think, about 5 stages in at this point. Yeah, I'm about to do my 5th proper stage of this. And so I haven't really had it spike difficulty-wise yet. I did play the opening levels on stream this week, and
yeah, it's mostly, it's exclusively with the bosses. I hit 2 bosses that were just such a jump that I'm like, does it want me to just grind? Because it already tells you early on, like, oh, you're going to have to replay stages to progress some stuff. I don't know what it wants me to do, because I just do not feel like I have what I need. For some of these, the one boss I only got through sheer luck, I think.
So, okay, let's just explain briefly what the game is for people, and then we can sort of dig into some of that a little bit. It is a third-person action game. You are traveling down a mountain as the spirit protector of a maiden who is seeking to perform a purification ritual, as the entire mountain has been defiled by evil spirits. The way this plays out is you travel through discrete stages, having to sort of lead the maiden from point A to point B, sometimes with some stops along the way, clearing a path for her through the expenditure of resources that you can acquire in the environment, and liberating villagers who can be assigned combat roles for the night phase of gameplay, in which the point B objective that you're trying to get the maiden to opens up and releases waves of monsters that are targeting the maiden. And so there's this sort of, during the daytime, you make progress towards the goal. During the nighttime, you defend the position that you've reached. I like this combination of things a lot. I think the levels are well designed, the ones that I've played so far, in terms of being geared towards that. From a action perspective, I like the combat. It's very simple. There's not a lot of complexity to be had. It's a 2-button combo system that's dictated by a number of basic attacks followed by a power attack that has different function based on how far down the combo chain you've gone. And you get a special attack that takes a long time to regenerate but is very powerful. And that's basically it. You have a dodge. And then you have the ability to sort of reposition units and even change their combat roles during combat if necessary. And there's some convenient, quick commands to have them rally around the maiden or target enemies further from her. It's basic, but everything works well and serves a function in combat, I find, so far. And as a result, the action can be interrupted so that you can stop and think about some strategic stuff, but it's not so bogged down in strategy that it feels overly complicated and that you're really interrupting action to do it. So I enjoy all of that. As you finish levels, every level has a boss encounter after it, where you're supplied with some resources to spend on the villagers that you previously rescued to assign them roles and then have a boss encounter. And the bosses are pretty varied. The enemy types are fairly basic for the, 4 levels I've completed so far, but the designs are great. Everything's based in Japanese folklore and creepy. And just visually on the whole, I really love this game. It's vibrant and just fun to look at. In between stages, you can also revisit them as bases of operation and use the villagers that you've rescued to make repairs, and making the repairs is rewarded with a secondary currency that is used to improve the abilities of the various unit types that you'll encounter and collect along the way. You typically get those from the boss encounters, though sometimes elsewhere. I like the way everything sort of flows together. I didn't really know what to expect when I booted it up, and I've kind of been pleasantly surprised by what I found. But what's your experience with it been? I
like it. I just, once I hit that boss, I kind of lost interest in continuing it.
Mm-hmm.
But I do like it. It's a nice little game. I like the tower defense elements. I like the idea of collecting these little villages and giving them roles, and I would really like to get back into it to get to a point where I've got a lot more of that and a lot more of the flexibility to try different roles and have a lot more villages to play around with. I really do not care for the poisoned ground near the gate where the enemies spawn from.
The miasma, yeah.
There are way more elegant things they could have done to keep you from essentially spawn camping. In fact, they do that a little ways into the game with the lamps that you've got to light so that your villagers can see the enemies. That keeps you away from the gate. But any level where there's not that, because your character's attacks constantly thrust you forward, and it just makes sense to post up near the front. I took a lot of damage that just felt unnecessary because they poisoned the gate to stop me standing right in front of it. Just to an invisible wall or something,
I don't know. I see where you're coming from. At the same time, I kind of like that it's there because it discourages me from, charging in there. And, enemies are invincible for a short period of time as they exit. And I could see an argument for simply increasing that. But at the same, and giving them time then to, set up an attack of their own and not just be mercilessly slaughtered by you as the totally outsized, capable player character. So, I could see some argument there. But then, the way the combat units are set up, you can, I use archers a lot and avail myself of that range. And so as soon as that invulnerability period is up, archers attack in there.
I just think there are more elegant ways of doing it. Like I say, with the lamps and stuff.
I think that the reason I like it is that it's tied to how that combat is very animated, and, they call it dance combat. And I like it because you have to learn control of it, which I found to be so valuable when dealing with larger enemies that I have to get around behind and navigate and so forth.
The problem with incentivizing you to take a step back is the monsters also come out of there really slowly.
Mm-hmm.
So if I've pulled back and then I'm just standing there waiting for them to come, that's why I was really pleased to see those dark levels where you have to keep your fellas in the light and stuff, because that is a proper incentive to keep you pulled back. That is actually quite elegant and cleverly done. I just find it's just a sledgehammer approach, just a kind of vulgar approach to just be poison the ground. So if you're too close, you dance into it, which just makes the main character look like a pillock. The demons moving slow and there being a lot of time between waves sometimes, or even when the waves are done and you're just stood there waiting for it to be daytime again. There is some ponderousness to that. To say nothing of the arbitrary restrictions you have on base building between the levels, which again just seems to be padding to force the replay. That's really my main issue with the game, is there's a lot of wasted time that doesn't have to be there. But the actual thrust of the gameplay is solid. You know, it feels a little Dynasty Warriors-ish, except with the tower defense elements. I love the visual design of everything. The masks that your little villagers wear, the way I forget her name, but the priestess, the way she looks and her outfit. God, the costumes are great. Yep. And the demons are just so good. And I love those possessed Torii gates that they come out of. The way these, big fingers just sort of come out the side of the gate and pull this flesh open. And then there's a big sort of demon head on top of it. Absolutely fell in love with the visual style and its use of real bright colours, which I'm always happy with, because so many games are so dark. And I've always said one of the great tragedies of the era of HD TV when it came up was that it coincided with games deciding they needed to be all moody and dark, when Viva Pinata really showed how to take advantage of HD. So I'm always happy to see a really bright, colourful game, especially with the visual design that this game has. That's more or less how I've been on it. I think it's a very good game that has some questionable design decisions.
I want to go back to what you said, because you reached a point where you're struggling and you're worried that it wants you to grind. And I think grind is not the way to think about what the game really does require.
I'll say that
you.
was a bit of a harsh term for me to use.
Well, it's not even that. I mean, it's just mechanically, I don't think it's reflective of what is required of you, or what is asked of you to do, because every one of these stages has secondary objective goals that you can return to them, and if you achieve them, you get more of that resource used to level up your unit types. And that feels like, even just in the early stages that I have played through, that does feel very necessary. The base building stuff in between also provides some of that, but I think it's like a 60-40 split in terms of the resources that you get. But it isn't like a situation where it wants you to replay the levels over and over again doing the same thing. It is offering you a different goal to a certain level, a different means of accomplishing the objective to focus on. So I think that it's a little bit better than just like you have to experience grind. And so I wanted to make sure that was clear. It is challenge focused.
You're absolutely right. Grind was the wrong term to use. And this comes from me playing a lot of latter-day Sonic games. Contriving reasons to get you to replay a stage always feels a bit unnecessary. I'd always rather a game be balanced in such a way that I can keep progress driving forward while building other things up. And again, it just comes to... And I think it's a difference in sort of how we view these things. In the... To me, I just think there are better ways of doing it. I think at times this game goes for a real sort of blunt approach to achieving what it wants to, when I think something a little more elegant would have made the pacing work better, at least for me. But I think, we are coming at it a bit different.
Yeah, and I don't disagree that there are probably more elegant ways of going about it. And if I had my druthers, one of the aspects of this type of mechanical design that I don't care for, that is featured in this and is often a part of it, is just tell me the secondary objectives before I start the level, or find a way to introduce them to me when you introduce the new mechanic that's relevant to them.
Yeah, I hate that shit.
Find some way of making it not like, oh, but did you know? And it's like, well, no, I didn't, because you didn't fucking tell me.
Yeah.
A lot of the irritation that I could potentially feel about these things when they show up. And as a rule, I don't mind them too much as long as the different things that you want me to do are kind of compelling. or if the things can either very clearly be done in one go, or the approach to which I would need to take is vastly, vastly different between these two goals. That's the no middle ground. Like, it can't be just a little difference and then you force me to do it all. It has to be very different, or it just sucks. Or, you know, you love the gameplay enough that you don't care, which I actually do like this a lot. It's short levels. Everything's done in like 20 minutes so far. It's a good pick up and play and then put it down and go do something else experience from that point of view too, which I really appreciate. So yeah, I like it. I'll probably keep with it until I probably reach some difficulty point, you know, some spike where I'm just like, the configuration of these units isn't what I want. Something else I will say that I appreciate is it does, because there isn't really an opportunity to grind, as we were talking about, and gain experience outside of what it offers you for accomplishing challenges and rebuilding base elements. It also allows you to refund that currency and remove abilities from your unit types to reapply them elsewhere.
That I do like.
Hasn't been an issue for me yet because I have largely completed all of the base stage challenges. The boss challenges are very specific, you know, or very limiting, beat them within this time frame. And I think I just don't even have units available to me yet to accomplish that. I'm within 6 seconds of the first boss, but that's the best run I can envision with what I have available to me. So, you know, I'll keep at it. But I do like that you can reorder that and it doesn't force you to do everything or go back or feel stuck. So that's it for that. Steph, have you played anything else?
I have. I played another game that Laura's played. If you want to do that.
I've probably not got as much to say about it as you, because this is my first time ever playing this game.
I've forgotten what it was. Oh! Yeah, Tomba,
yeah. This is a PS1 game where you play as a little pink-haired caveman, wildly fucking throwing himself around, arms and legs waving behind him, landing mouth first on enemies to, like, throw them around.
Biting pigs all day long. Biting dwarfs to learn dwarven language. That's how language works.
That is how language works. As someone who never played this back in the day and only thought to check out the remaster because I do a podcast called Control Alt Access with someone called Arevia, and it is her favourite game of all time, so I was like, right, I'm going to give it a go. Some things that I took away from it. I like what that game does with 2.5D perspective. I like how it handles, for a game of that era, being able to, like, move into background layers and climb up against walls, and now you're slightly further back in the environment.
It still looks very nice.
Yeah, it handles, like, rotation of 3D space in a 2D perspective game, like, very well for its time. It's got a good, silly sense of humour. I will never tire of wildly throwing myself around the level being the primary mechanic of getting around. On some primal level, that will never not be great. I have some little quibbles with it. I don't like the approach it has to, hey, when you first boot up this game, here is just a wall of text of paragraphs of every single thing you can do in the game in lengthy paragraphs that my brain just, I cannot focus enough to internalize any of what it's fucking telling me there. And that just, like, put me off a little at the start, just because that's not a thing I do well with. But on the flip side, I appreciate that you can save anywhere and that you can do rewind mechanics, which rewinding you definitely couldn't do back in the day, and as I understand it, you could only save at the start of levels previously. I've not played a huge amount of it. So far, I see the weird appeal of this. I see why this is uniquely memorable to people, but I've not played enough of it, nor do I have enough long-term context for it to have much more of an opinion of it yet.
Yeah, so Tomba, people who, there's only like 2 or 3 of them still sort of within my online sphere now, But people who are old enough to remember the pre-YouTube Jimquisitions will know about this. In fact, it's how I learned that there was a Tomba remaster, because someone brought it up to me, because there are a few people that are old enough that do associate me with Tomba, because one of the very first escapist Jimquisitions, it was the very first one that went from the escapist audience hating my work to liking it. That was the one where I found the format that, you know, I still largely carry on today. It was about something to do with the PlayStation Network fucking up, and I did a video about, like, how Sony can make it up to you, and one of them was just Tomba. Make it up to us with Tomba, give us more Tomba, or the old Tomba, just do Tomba now. So yeah, people have sort of associated it with me, even though, like, back in the day, most of my experience of it comes from a demo, which is how a lot of poor kids experienced video games back then, was demo discs. And I fucking loved the Tomba demo. And yeah, I've been playing it. There is some good nostalgia there. Some elements are really long-winded and convoluted, and I fucking hate them. Mostly with sort of some of the traversal. I don't like the awkwardness of Tomba's jumping. But it still looks really nice. The music is fantastic. And the little puzzles that happen, some of those are really quite clever. I like how so many of them are not really mandatory to complete, and you can just accidentally discover them. You know, you'll find a monkey up in a tree and talk to him, and he'll say he's hungry. And then at some point you can find some bananas and give them to him, and then he'll give you a thing. Or grabbing hold of those peaches that look like butts that fart when you grab them. And, you know, most kids in the day would have just accidentally discovered that if you do that while an enemy pig is under that, it will shrink. And then you can pick it up. And then you've suddenly completed a quest, or events as they call them. The way it's laid out puts me in mind of, like, classic Spectrum Commodore 64 adventure games. These sort of platforming puzzle adventures like Dizzy, the Dizzy the Egg series, which is one of the things I've really liked about it. As a remaster, it's a bit, you know, they call it Special Edition. There's not a lot special about it. They've gutted up the graphics. They've put on a few, like, extra, like, things like concept art and a couple interviews. Saving anywhere is really nice, because there are some platforming elements that will just cost you a life. You know, if you fall down a pit. I'm thinking in particular about the mountain that blows wind at you and really fucks your ability to jump, which is already hard enough to judge because it's, like, unwieldy. So being able to save and rewind there is good. The rewind function, though, bit shit. It's like when you double tap while watching a video on your phone. You can't just rewind. It'll skip you back several seconds, like with snapshot frames. And it's, especially if it is like a platforming bit that you are redoing over and over because you keep missing, like, a jump on a tiny little ledge. Unless you arbitrarily wait for a few seconds before you do it, you run the risk of the next rewind point being something else that you didn't want to, like, do, that you had to do. So I don't know why they didn't, like, just let you rewind properly like a lot of games let you do. So yeah, as an actual special edition, I find it a bit wanting.
Yeah.
But the base game itself is still solid stuff.
I will say, my understanding of part of the what has been changed and what hasn't comes down to the source code for that game has just been lost. So this is a ROM running inside some sort of layer applied over it. And I'm like, I can see that there's probably some limitations to what you can do in that situation, but it doesn't change the fact that, yeah, some of the things haven't aged ideally.
Yeah. Like, it's unfortunate, but, you know, it leads to the same result.
Yeah. The end result being still, hey, do better preservation of games.
Yes, absolutely. You know, a few weeks back I was reading about how Warner Brothers had torched a bunch of, like, Looney Tunes art that had been done, just destroying art. I guess the one good thing about how corporations have learned that they can endlessly plumb the depths of nostalgia is that hopefully they're keeping a lot of contemporary stuff so that they can exploit it later. So, Unfortunately, that's been balanced out by the fact that there is some art they won't release at all for the tax breaks, which is just as bad, if not worse. So, fuck capitalism, I guess.
Indeed.
Yeah.
The only other thing I've started playing that I'll very quickly touch on, and this is going to take me barely any time at all, is I've been playing some World of Goo 2. Did either of you play the original World of Goo?
I played a little bit of it back in the day.
Yeah, just a bit.
Yeah, this is a game from Tomorrow Corporation, the company that did such games as Little Inferno, which is still my favourite thing they've ever done. Sit there burning shit in the fireplace. World of Goo, game about building structures out of goo. It's imagine one of those like bridge building simulators, but the connections you're making are essentially jelly, so they're not particularly strong. Try and do as few moves as possible to reach a pipe so that all the goo balls get sucked up, and then try and redo levels to minimize your number of moves or maximize the speed or the number of goo balls that get sucked up. Mechanically, this is very much still that. There are some new little gimmicks involved, like some early ones include like some cannons that you set the angle and then any goo balls that reach them will just sort of automatically fire in that direction. Fundamentally, it is more of that same formula. I'm playing it on Switch. There is no controller controls or analog controls. Your options are play it in handheld mode with a touchscreen or play it docked with motion controls. Those are your only two options. And I get it, but also it feels weird to not just let an analog stick make the cursor move. My main takeaway of any note on it is I do enjoy where the narrative is going this time. The short version is, the story this time is, what if oil corporations planted one tree and greenwashed their public perception, and now everyone feels like they can buy products without feeling guilty? It is just oil company greenwashing as a narrative through a little bit of an exaggerated lens, but really not. It's just very directly the thing, and they're doing a good job of not making it as bleak as it would otherwise be, but it's very, we're trying to have a laugh, but this is a real thing and it's quite a lot, huh? Having fun with it. Nothing about this has really made me go, if you didn't feel passionately about the series already, I'm not seeing any reason that this would win you over. Anyone else played anything else before we wrap up?
I played one more thing.
Mm-hmm.
A game called Conscript, which is a horror game set in World War I. I love the premise, first and foremost. What this does is, imagine if Resident Evil was set in the trenches of World War I, and because the so-called Great War was so fucking monstrous, you don't need zombies. You already have a monster, and it's called the war. So everything in it is grounded in reality, which only makes the horror more horrifying. Your enemies are German soldiers, armed with trench shovels or the occasional rifle. There are rats, which that's the one bit the game takes liberty with, is like the size of the rats and how quickly they can bite you and cause an infection. But other than that, this is just trench warfare, and the game does a fantastic job of communicating the mud and the blood and the desperation of World War I, which is a war I've always been particularly fascinated by myself because of how fucking pointless and cruel it was and how stupid the leadership of that war was. Like, just the senseless, wasteful tactics. And all of that is really sort of well rendered and brought to life here. The fact that it's like got a pulled back camera and pixelated graphics does nothing to take away from that. They really make it feel rain-soaked and muddy and horrible. The only real shame is that they've also perfectly replicated another thing about World War I, which was all of the boring, repetitive drudgery that the soldiers had to go through. So while I love the atmosphere, and there is enough going that I was compelled to keep playing, some of its confusing difficulty with convoluted time-wasting bollocks, and the harsh punishment that you can get if you die, which will require slogging from a far-flung save point all the way back through areas that you will have already been constantly backtracking through. if not for ferrying key items around, but your pathetic inventory space that means constant hoofing it back to storage chests if you want all of the resources at your disposal. I felt routinely, for as much as I keep picking it back up, I've sworn off it several times because it feels really discouraging at times. I'll die and I'll be like, okay, I don't want to play this again because it took a long, boring time to get here, which is a shame. And combat also it's not particularly enjoyable, which some would say was the point, but it's also mandatory at places. Stealth, what there is of it, is barely existent. The best tactic is to run away half the time, especially if you transition to another room and go back, everything's reset, which I highly recommend anyone playing abuse the hell out of that. To give you an idea of just how much the game wants to be punishing, you have to opt in at the start of the game to automatic checkpoints and unlimited saves, because they do the ink ribbon thing. I think if I'd have not opted into being able to save at will, I would have completely stopped playing, like early into it, because it's one of those games where you're not afraid of combat because you might die in some like horrible way. I'm afraid of the combat because I will have lost so much of my finite time and will lose more of it repeating the process, going through rooms that are set up in such a way that you can't just go from one door to another. There's some pointlessly windy stuff, and it only gets worse. Once you leave the trenches, ironically, the open areas in the sort of chapter 3 are a maze despite being out in the open, because, you know, they use potholes and rubble and stuff to make you just wind like a snake through an area where there's nothing going on. So it's just wasting your time for the sake of it. And I just don't care for it when I've got to ferry items back and forth using an inventory system where the slots not only carry your weapons, your resources, your healing items, it also is where you put all your key items and wearable equipment. If I'm wearing my gas mask, why is it in my fucking bag? You know? So yeah, I want to love this game. And I think if it hadn't have been so preoccupied with being quote-unquote brutal and harsh, and a lot of that focus translating into wasting my fucking time, I think I'd have fallen in love with it. As it stands, it is a terrific game dragged down to decent. But it is still decent. There is still something that keeps drawing me back. And a lot of it is that terrific atmosphere. But unfortunately, and you've always got to be careful with horror games, familiarity breeds contempt. And the more you're exposed to the horror of something in a game, the less horrified you become with it over time. You know, my biggest criticism of like that Slender game was when you're running around that forest being bothered by the Slender Man, eventually he's just harassing you and he becomes really annoying. Not scary, annoying. And that's where this game ends up a lot of the time is, oh, here are the rats. They run really fast, and while all of my attacks require a long charge up to hit with any efficiency, they bite so quick it might as well be contact damage. And they keep pace with you really quick. And even rolling past them can get them to bite you and then infect you, which will cut your health in half until you spend time combining items to make a disinfectant bandage. It is a shame, because I want to love this game. It does have a lot of great moodiness going for it, some nice writing. And when it does work as a horror game, it works really well. A lot of that is with the visual storytelling. The scenes of the aftermath of violence and the senseless human waste, you know, bodies floating in a big pothole filled with rainwater that is now turned red. Evocative stuff. And when you are in a new area for the first time, hunting around for items and scrabbling for resources, that's pretty cool. But yeah, too much backtracking, too much slog, and I don't want to fear death because it means having a really boring slog back. That's not the way to disincentivize me from dying. It disincentivizes me from playing. And that's Conscript.
Yeah. We got a couple of very quick things to finish off on now that we've done all the stuff we've played. One just nice bit of news that's come out of this week. You know how AFTRA is a very, 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 very compulsively replayable, some might say addictive, game that uses gambling-esque mechanics to be a very addictive thing to play? Local Thunk, the developer behind the game, has gone out of his way to say, hey, the thought of AFTRA becoming a true gambling game is something I hate so much that when I created my will recently, I stipulated that AFTRA's IP may never be sold or licensed to any gambling company, out of fear that those addictive mechanisms created might be put into a thing people could lose money on.
I appreciate the gesture. I think it is ultimately meaningless because, you know, it's not something that's ultimately going to be all that legally enforceable, I think.
They've spoken with legal people who know better than I do about what is achievable in that regard, but I appreciate the sentiment of going, oh god, I don't want this thing I've made used for evil.
Yep, I think that's great. Good for them.
Yeah. And I'm going to end here with one thing that is, like, adjacent. I have a thing and I need a place to talk about it, and I'm going to talk about it here. I've stumbled upon the most frustrating and confusing nerd property drink experience I think I've ever had. So I was looking around town for weird video game drinks. I didn't find video game drinks this week. I found anime drinks. I found 2 drinks themed around. There's an anime called My Hero Academia about a school for kids with superpowers.
That's a great show.
It's a fucking good show. I enjoy it a lot. But I found 2 My Hero Academia themed drinks. There was one called Ignite and one called One for All, named after 2 people's powers. And I was like, cool. These are probably 2 different flavors of drink. Ignite flavor and One for All flavor, whatever that fucking means. So here is the results of my research about this. There are 2 flavors of drink that exist, but it's 50-50 random chance which flavor is in which can. So I bought these 2 cans, and they might just be the same flavor as each other. There's no guarantee. There's a blue raspberry and there's a strawberry. And, like, one of them's sort of a bluish can and one's sort of a reddish can. You'd think you'd put the strawberry in the red one and the blue raspberry in the blue one. I've opened both of these, and they're both the same flavour, but I can't tell you whether it's strawberry or blue raspberry. I can't tell you what flavour either of these 50-50 random chance flavour drinks are.
What if it's like the classic, is this dress, you know, this color or this color situation? And they've crafted a flavor that's going to taste different to different people, but they didn't actually have to, like, make 2 products. They just label the cans different.
That's what I think has happened, because I drank one and couldn't work out what the flavour was, so I googled it and then found out about the 50-50 flavour situation, and then found out that it was supposed to be strawberry or blue raspberry, and went, that doesn't help me. It's... I could tell myself it's one or the other. I don't know.
And it doesn't help that, you know, while we have flavors that we associate with blue raspberry, the blue raspberry does not exist anywhere in nature. There is no baseline for what blue raspberry tastes like. Whereas strawberry, you have some idea of what that's supposed to be.
Yeah, they've put this in 2 different coloured cans, and I'm falling down the rabbit hole of wanting to say the red one is strawberry and the blue one is blue raspberry, but they're the same flavour, and I think it's just because the colour is making me think, surely it's got to be this split, right? So
I find the raspberry flavouring confusing, not just because blue raspberry isn't a thing, but if you give me a raspberry drink, I'll drink it and I'll be like, nah, I'm not really that into raspberries. You give me a blue raspberry drink, and I'm like, this is delicious, this is my best one from flavours. And I don't know if they're different or it's just the blueness, because I'm very attracted to blue drinks.
Right, I could not tell you. But yeah, that has been my attempt to find weird nerd drinks this week, was 2 drinks that could have been different flavours, but I randomly rolled wrong and they're the same flavour. And I don't know which of the 2 flavours they are.
Amazing. I have good news.
Ooh.
A little bit of good news.
Oh, yeah.
I talked on the podcast, I think it was like 2 weeks back, because we announced Date Everything, the game that I have been writing for. Sassy Chap Games, the developer, and this will be expected because it was founded by voice actors. They have signed the interim agreement with SAG-AFTRA over the, the strikes and stuff. There will be not only the ability for anyone, any of the performers in the game to be able to talk freely and openly about their roles and their credits on it. They've also signed AI protections for all of the performers as well. So no voice from there is getting lifted. So I just thought that was a nice positive thing. And, I was talking to the director, Ray Chase, about this because in many ways, Date Everything is a sort of anti-AI game, not just from the sheer volume of writing and vocal talent it has. The thing kicking off the game is that AI has taken your job. So yeah, I am just really happy about that. It's nice to know that I've thrown in with some ethical folks.
It is one of maybe 3 games I have seen so far announce they have signed the interim agreement. So yeah, you picked a good one. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I think that's all the stuff for this week.
Alrighty, wow. Yeah. I may be dating everything, but Laura, you have written everything. Every single word in every single book on Earth. And how can people find out about the stuff you are writing and recording and all the other stuff?
You can find out about all the stuff I'm doing at Laura K. Buzz pretty much everywhere. Laura K. Buzz on Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, TikTok, Patreon, that's the one that pays the bills, Blue Sky, Mastodon, all the things, Laura K. Buzz, you'll find all the stuff. Content's going to be a little all over the place this month because I've got some work travel-y bits coming up, but I will be at Gamescom, so expect some coverage coming out of that. Just Laura K. Buzz, you'll find all the things. What about you, Conrad? Where are you out on the internet?
Oh, you can find me at Conrad Zimmerman on Instagram and Blue Sky. You can hang out with me on Twitch at twitch.tv/thatconradzimmerman. I stream on Mondays, Tuesdays, and Wednesdays. You can buy anti-capitalist propaganda and Jimquisition merchandise at mercenarycreative.com. Got some new stuff coming there, hopefully soon. And you can support everything that I do online at Patreon. It's patreon.com/fistshark. And you know who else has a Patreon? Stephanie Sterling.
Indeed. Patreon.com/Jimquisition. That supports this podcast and the video show and the reviews that I do on thejimquisition.com. We've got a review of Thank Goodness You're Here on the site right now. Should have one for Conscript either before this goes out or after it. My next... I also am back on streaming, basically whenever I get a chance to. That's at twitch.tv/Jim Sterling, so give that a follow if you want to see me. I've been streaming through Clash Artifacts of Chaos, one of my favourite games. And my next wrestling date, I've been saying it wrong on this podcast past couple of weeks, but I am confirmed to be at PCW's Preston show. That'll be in Preston Flag Market, which is out in the open. There are paid seats, but anyone can wander up and have a look. So that's in Preston, heart of Preston, August 17th, not 14th, August 17th. So look up PCW for that. My next date after that is September 1st. I will be at Tidal Wrestling in Huddersfield. And then September 20th, I'm back in Leeds after a career-defining moment last time, back in Leeds, September 20th for True Grit Wrestling. And that's it. Those are me. That's all that stuff. Thank you all so much for listening and supporting and all of that. And we will see you next week. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.